Okay, welcome to our exhibit, The Life of a Nazi Soldier. Eventually, after you do something a certain way for an extensive period of time, it becomes your normal. This exhibit allows us to explore the normal life of the Nazi soldier. This pertains to their physical and mental emotions towards their job and family.
The Nazi soldiers gained authority over the Jews when Hitler rose to power. Therefore, they were controlled as well. They had to be sure not to let their emotions override their job and what needed to be done. Imagine having to torture a group of people, whether you approved of it or not. As you travel through your exhibit, keep in mind that a majority of Nazi soldiers enjoyed their job. However, some felt the exact opposite. Loyalty to the fatherland was the first priority.
My part of the exhibit was the training of a Nazi soldier, and after the Germans lost World War I, there was a treaty called the Treaty of Versailles that was signed, and it set the conditions of peace for Germany. It basically said that Germany not only had to admit its guilt for the war and that it was all their fault, but they had to pay a large amount of money, which raised the taxes in all the cities, and it angered the citizens. Adolf Hitler was a soldier in World War I, and he had very strong beliefs that it was all of the Jewish people's fault, that they were in this time of sorrow. And since he was the leader of the Nazi Party, they got the most votes in the election of 1933, and he gained most power over Germany. After he gained all this power, he started these youth programs for children, young German children, and it taught them strength, obedience, and nationalism. When a young boy was about 10 years old, he would go to the German Young People group, and then when he was about 14, he would go into the Hitler Youth, and they stayed there till about 18 years old, and then they would go into training for the war. And all their training was not that official. They just used live ammunition, which caused injuries, sometimes even death. And so pretty much it's like really hard to be a Nazi soldier.
Okay, my exhibit was the emotions of a Nazi soldier, and the emotions really varied between the Nazis. One was, in order to get the job done, you can't think about what you're doing, and that was obviously by a soldier who wasn't very satisfied with his job. And then we have another one with a soldier who had really different beliefs, and he said that he didn't regret anything that he did to the Jews, and if he admitted to regret, then he wouldn't live another second. So there's a lot of varying opinions. If they did feel any remorse at all, they probably didn't realize it till after the war was over, because all the soldiers were brainwashed along with the rest of the world, so they didn't really know any better. But even if they did feel regret during the war, they didn't really have the power or courage to do anything about it. There was one soldier who did, though, and we found a story about him. And it was a sergeant told a Jewish boy to go out into the woods, and then he told a soldier to go out there and kill him. So the soldier went out there and shot his gun straight up into the air and told the boy to run. And so the boy ran away, and he became a famous author to tell the stories. So if it wasn't for that soldier, he wouldn't have been the person he is today.
As said earlier, if the Nazi soldiers had any feeling of sympathy for the Jews at all, they were forced to ignore their emotions. Ever since they can remember, they've been following Hitler's order and anything he told them to do, and most of the time these orders were very harsh. In the concentration camps, they were forced to collect the Jews, kill them, beat them, and even verbally torment them. Although we can defend those Nazi soldiers who were just doing their job, there still were many who had the same beliefs as Hitler and even got pure enjoyment out of doing what they did. Nazi forms of amusement and punishment, as seen in this picture, are so harsh that sometimes they would go up to Jewish men and cut off their side locks. Later they would force them on the ground and then shoot them. In the concentration camps, they would occasionally ask Jewish men and women to take off their clothing because they were going to give them a shower. But when they were taken to the shower room, it actually turned out to be a gas chamber, and they did this just to eliminate the Jews. They would also burn the Jews, and they did this in very large chimneys where their ashes would fall out for everyone to see. And when the Nazi soldiers got questioned what the ashes were, they would claim it was snow. A Nazi soldier's day consisted basically of starving, beating, executing, and torturing the Jews.
Okay, so we've already talked about the job, the training, and the emotions of a Nazi soldier. What we haven't covered yet would be the family. And we're specifically going to talk about the wife of a Nazi soldier. Hitler made it very clear that he wanted women in Nazi Germany to have one job, and that would be to take care of the children. One of the earliest laws that was passed by Hitler was the law in 1933, and it was the law for the encouragement of marriage. This law stated that all newly wedded couples would get a loan of 1,000 marks, which was about 9 months of average income. However, this was not simply to be paid back. If you had one child, that meant that 25% of your loan would be paid off. 2 children meant that 50% of the loan would be paid off. And 4 children meant that the entire loan would be cleared. Of course, this law had reasoning, and that was for newly wedded couples to have as many children as they could. Hitler needed the population to fill the spaces in Eastern Europe. The booming population of Nazi Germany caused France to fear that their population was rapidly falling. France then decided to ban all abortions because of this. Even though Nazi women were housewives or mothers, their lives were controlled, so women could not wear makeup, wear trousers. They were only allowed to wear long skirts. They could not wear, dye their hair, get perms, wear high heels, or lose weight because it was considered bad for childbirth. They also weren't allowed to smoke because it was considered un-German-like to do so. The Motherhood Cross was a holiday that was celebrated on August 12th, and it had been the birthday of Hitler's mother. This award went out to people who had given birth to the largest number of children. So if you had 8 children, you would get a gold medal. If you had 6 children, you would get a silver medal. And if you had 4 children, you would get a bronze medal. The women that were alive back in Nazi Germany when all these laws came into power, they had to live by certain morals and quotes. And so one of the quotes was by Hitler, and it was, "In the Germanic nations, there has never been anything else than equality of rights for both women. Both sexes have their rights, their tasks, and these tasks were in the case of each equal in dignity and value. And therefore, men and women were on an equality." And that was quoted in 1935.